So when you start losing weight, how does your body decide where it's going to take the fat from? Well, we know that spot reduction is a myth, so we can't target specific areas of our body and just lose fat there. This is primarily determined by our genetics. And while there are differences between how people will store body fat and mobilize body fat, there are also patterns that we can observe to get an idea about how this process works. And what I thought I'd do in this video to help you out is to break down the process of how we lose body fat across 5 different stages and which changes should you expect as you go through each stage of getting leaner. So one thing we're definitely fortunate with is that one of the most dangerous types of body fat for our health, visceral fat, is also one of the first ones we're going to lose. And this happens in what I would call the stage 1 of fat loss. Visceral fat is the fat that surrounds our internal organs. It's also the fat that gives guys that beer belly look. So if you're a guy 25% body fat or above and you have that belly, even if you're skinny fat, you very likely carry a lot of visceral fat, which is highly correlated with negative health outcomes. Luckily, this fat is easier to mobilize, and this is one of the reasons why we can get rid of it earlier in the journey. So as soon as you start training and creating a calorie deficit from your diet, you will start noticing some pretty big changes in the size of your waist. This is one of the reasons why I also recommend adding a tape measurement to track your progress instead of just relying on the weight scale. Now, the type of body fat that we all want to reduce is the subcutaneous fat. This is the fat under our skin, which brings me to stage 2 of fat loss. Now, with stage 2, this is still very early in the journey. We could even combine stage 1 and 2. And in stage 2, the areas that your body is really losing fat from will be your neck, your face, and your shoulders. And this is also a phase where a lot of people start getting compliments from others who are noticing these changes. And these compliments are a great early sign that you're on the right track, and you should definitely allow them to motivate you to be even more committed to the process. Now, I did mention losing face fat, and there's some mixed experiences here. Some people do report losing quite a lot of face fat early in their journey, and I would say this is the case for those at very high body fat percentages, so for men at 30% body fat or above, but there are also some exceptions here. If you're skinny fat, starting a fat loss phase around 20 or 22% body fat, you might notice that there isn't that much of a difference as you're getting leaner because you didn't have that much face fat to begin with. So it really boils down to the individual situation. Now, moving on to stage 3 of fat loss, this is where most guys are going to start noticing changes in their arms, their chest, their back, especially their upper back, and their thighs. And this is also the stage where a lot of guys start getting worried about losing muscle because they noticed some decreased size, especially in areas like their arms. And what's really happening here is that they started losing subcutaneous fat in those areas and also intramuscular fat, especially in their arms, which of course will lead to some decrease in size and that flatter look. But muscle loss itself isn't very likely if you're doing things right. If you're getting enough protein, that you're doing progressive resistance training, that you're getting sufficient sleep, and that you're avoiding crash dieting. If you do all those things and you hit the like button, you're doing everything in your power to protect your lean muscle while you're losing body fat. And one common mistake that I see guys make in this stage is they're only assessing their progress from the front of their body. They're only looking at the mirror, they only see the midsection on the front, while they're making all this progress in their back usually, which they can't even notice. So my recommendation is to take your progress pictures of the back as well and make sure that you're really using that to see if you're making real progress, because you can often miss that and then get discouraged thinking that you're basically stuck. Now, moving on to stage 4 of fat loss, this is where most guys will finally start seeing some pretty big differences in their midsection, while everything else, of course, is also getting leaner. The typical signs in this stage are increased vascularity in their forearm, their arm, even their shoulders. There are guys that are going to start seeing their obliques. They're going to start seeing that first row of abs, which is going to turn into a blurry 4-pack, eventually into a lean 4-pack. And then at the end of this stage, the only thing that's going to be left is that lower portion of the abs that still has some body fat. Now, one thing that's important to note here is that not everybody has a 6-pack. Some people will only be able to have a lean 4-pack. One of the most famous examples of this is Arnold Schwarzenegger. If we look at photos from his prime in bodybuilding, even though he's really lean, he still doesn't have a 6-pack. That comes down to genetics. And one of the things that can make a really big difference here is how much muscle development do you have with your abs. I know there's a saying that abs are made in the kitchen, but that's not saying the full story. Abs need to be trained like any other muscle group, which means sufficient volume and progressive overload. And if you have well-developed abs, they will be visible even at higher body fat percentages. For me personally, my abs are visible even above 15% body fat. And there's also a lot of differences here. Some guys will notice that they will still have some fat left in their legs while their abs are completely visible, while others will notice that they actually have ripped legs while still have some fat covering their abs. And with women, it's actually very typical that their abs are completely visible while they still have fat left in their hips and their thighs. Now, as we get into stage 5 of fat loss, this is where guys will be fighting to get rid of those last bits of body fat that are covering their lower abs, a little bit of love handles, and some stubborn fat that's left on their glutes, which is only important for competitive bodybuilders. And if you're someone who really wants that completely shredded look where there's no fat left and lower abs, well, you're looking at 10% or even 8% body fat. The question is, do you want to go there? Do you want to stay there? What do you want to do? Because for most people, 8% to 10% body fat will not be that sustainable. So you might want to go there for a little bit and then go back up to 12 or 15% body fat. And that's another reason to train your abs so they become visible even in higher body fat percentages, if that's something you like. Now, if you want those ripped and shredded glutes, that's at 8% body fat and below, and it's for competitors. I actually know a couple of competitors that have complained that they can't sit in a chair for a long time without using a pillow because they've lost their cushioning as they've lost their body fat. So that's something to think about. So what can we do about that last bit of stubborn body fat? Well, there's nothing special you need to do. The mechanism is the same, it's just that certain areas of our body require more time to lean out. And I know some people dread this and they think it's too slow, but when you truly get to those last 5 to 10 pounds, last 2 to 4.5 kilos, every week makes a big difference because you're tapping into those stores of body fat that are literally in the midsection. I know it's hard to do. I know you have to stay pretty dialed in, but it's also very motivating to see those changes. So the bottom line is there's no magic formula or some supplement that's going to help you get shredded and get rid of all that stubborn body fat. It still boils down to making sure you're in a calorie deficit, getting a sufficient amount of protein, progressive resistance training, getting your steps in to make sure you can create that deficit a bit easier, getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and being consistent. And as you're getting closer to 10% body fat, if you're now going super aggressive, you're trying to rush the process, well, you're risking falling off track. And if you go too aggressive with your calorie deficit, you may even start losing muscle. So at that point, it becomes very important that you stay patient, that you look at your numbers, that you double down on precision with your diet to ensure that you are creating that calorie deficit. And that's how you will see results. What's going to help you with results is hitting that subscribe button below, as well as hitting the bell icon for notifications. Details for coaching and working with me are in the description below, so check those out as well. Leaving another helpful video here for you at the end, so check out that video, and I'm going to see you right there.